what's your favorite philosopher and why, and your favorite mathematician? Uh, Philosophy changes over time. When I was growing up, I was very black and white in my mindset. So I loved Bertrand Russell, and it was analytic philosophy. It's like there's a deduction that you can use, and you can understand the entire universe through a series of deductions and calculations. And there's a way to analytically think around the construction of reality, whether it be metaphysics or epistemology or ethics. He had a lot to say about ethics. He had a lot to say about epistemology. A lot to be desired on the metaphysics side, because he was so rigid and atheistic that it's like the metaphysics just don't exist. They're delusions. Why I'm Not a Christian was one of Russell's favorite essays that he wrote. And as I've gotten older and I've become a bit more immersed in world and culture, and I've had a chance to see many different things, I'm starting to become more enamored with process philosophy, this idea that we live in one big tapestry. But I'll have more to say about that in a bit. There's a lot more to say about that. It's deep. But in general, you have to have, for it to be a good philosophical system, an ability to engage with the problems of your time and the existential problems of existence. And any good philosophical system should give you the ability to derive meaning from life. It's so important to be able to derive meaning. You have to be able to connect yourself in some way and find a thread of what is your life about. The vast majority of unhappy people and unmotivated people that I've found are people without a mission, people without a meaning. They don't know why they're here. They can't understand it. They, some cases, don't care. And you ask them, well, what's your life goal? And I just go to work. I don't know. And they're lost. And imagine being in a boat in darkness, just adrift on the sea, with no particular direction to go. It's not a very satisfying life. And that's where most people are at. So good philosophical systems, what they do is they give you the ability to navigate and find a place to go. And they find, if really good ones, give you the ability to enjoy the journey as you travel. That's what Albert Camus was talking about. He's another one of my favorite philosophers, absurdism. When you wrote about Sisyphus and the story of Sisyphus enjoying pushing the boulder, and you'll often hear me reference that. There is such a kernel of truth to these types of things. Bonus points if your philosophical system also has the ability to accept paradoxes and find ways to resolve them, and your philosophical system has the ability to deal with unknowable things in a way that doesn't destroy the system. So there's all these things that we don't quite understand, like consciousness and panpsychism and so forth. And we don't really have good frameworks at the moment to encapsulate them in such a way that you can absolutely say, yeah, this is how it should work, like we do with physics, for example, and the fundamental laws of physics. So good philosophical systems give you the ability to flirt with these things and play around with them, but you don't get so lost in it that you never get anywhere, or you don't ignore it. Like that's one of the problems with Richard Dawkins or any of these people that are hardcore atheists. They have decided on a construction of the universe with the senses, cognition, and facts that they have today. And they're religious about it. They say religion is evil. Mysticism is evil. It causes harm and ignorance and destroys humanity. Okay. Well, it's a vital component of our ability to survive. In fact, every single major culture has an ascendancy and a collapse. And during the collapse, you go through some terrible times. For example, when the Pilgrims came to America, Jamestown, they just discovered some bones recently, and they analyzed them. They found out that probably there was cannibalism in 1607 to 1610 from the famine that was occurring there. You could see the cut marks in the skull from where they were skinning people. That's pretty hard times when you start eating each other. So what keeps you going is some sort of transcendent faith. And if you strip faith away from people, they lose their ability to deal with the unknowable, and they lose their ability to navigate life, and they descend into a state where it's quite difficult to be happy. It's not impossible, but it's quite difficult because basically you're just limited by you. And when you admit something metaphysically above you, then you now have the potential of growth. You have the potential that there's something out there. And we're learning all the time. Like, for example, the brain seems to be a quantum computer. There's a lot of discussion about this from Roger Penrose's research, that there's quantum-like effects that are connected to cognition. Well, that means quantum entanglement could potentially come into play. And that means humans to non-humans could be connected in ways that we couldn't even possibly understand over unlimited distances. There's a big deal there. And so there's so much more to the story. And to judge the story solely based upon the system that we're running, the hardware that we're running, knowing full well that hardware is very primitive compared to the scope and scale of the universe. So a good philosophical system should give you the ability to navigate a universe where you know your hardware is incomplete and your knowledge is very incomplete, and that there's unlimited potential for growth, and to have a joy in your heart as you go about it. Now, in terms of mathematics, there's a lot of mathematicians like Ed Finkel and Terry Tao and others that I deeply admire because of their colossal brilliance, and they're really pushing the state-of-the-art mathematics, and they've devoted themselves to mathematical education. Jeremy Avogad is another one. He's the director of the Hoskinson Center for Formal Mathematics. He's what I consider to be a complete mathematician. He's an equal part philosopher as he is computer scientist, as he is mathematician, and he put all pieces together. And he thinks about math as a system in addition to the problems of mathematics, and he worries very deeply about it. He's a phenomenal teacher as well, and a great communicator of science. Historical mathematicians, I have great admiration for Grothendieck, and a great admiration for Riemann and Henri Poincaré. I think these were mathematicians of colossal intellect. Gauss obviously was probably the smartest of all of them, but actually the least useful, because he refused to show what was behind the curtain. So he came up with these brilliant insights, but he wouldn't reveal the scratch work. So while he pushed mathematics along, unfortunately, how to think the way Gauss thought, it was never really focused on. That's why I like people more like George Poya, for example, or Paul Halmos, who devoted an enormous amount of time into discussing the process of thinking in doing these things. There are mathematical philosophers like Joel Damon Hampkins is another one, Lectures on the Philosophy of Mathematics, which is a great book and highly recommend if people want to understand more about the philosophical underpinnings of mathematics. I think more in systems these days.